Hi, and welcome back to Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. I am your host, John Strazicich, and we'll be continuing on here in our discussion in Hebrews chapter 3, verses 12 to 19. Okay, and coming to this unit, we'll look at what Thompson has to say here. The warning to beware lest there be in any one of you an evil heart of unfaithfulness echoes the psalmist, harden not your heart, and summarizes the bitterness and rebellion as unfaithfulness. As with other New Testament writers, the author places great significance on faith, that is, pistis. However, for the author of Hebrews, pistis is described never as faith in Christ, but as the faithfulness of the one who holds firm or is reliable. Not only does he describe Moses and Jesus as faithful, he also describes God as faithful and keeping promises in 10:23. Thus, faithfulness is the appropriate response to the promise of God. Pistis is the equivalent of patience and endurance in holding firm until the end. Thus, the unfaithfulness against which the author warns is the equivalent of falling away from the living God. And he's telling us to look at 3:12 here. And the prime example is Israel in the wilderness. To fall away is also the equivalent of neglecting the great salvation. So obviously, when Thompson comes here, he's no card-carrying, once saved, always saved exegete. He's just simply taking the text at what it says and looking at Hebrews in terms of biblical theology. That means we're just looking at what the author of the book of Hebrews says in isolation of every other book in outside of it. So that what you're doing is you're trying to just look at how that's keeping you honest in your exegesis of a particular text. Now, I'm not to do away. I mean, systematic theology has its place, but it only has its place after you do a biblical theology of each book. So you understand exactly what the author of the book of Hebrews would have to say on a subject like soteriology. And it's obvious that his warning, his many, 5 warning passages, does not ever leave place that this author would be card-carrying member of the once saved, always saved denominations. Okay, he would definitely not belong to anyone like that. He basically has an Old Testament. His soteriology would firmly be based in soteriology of the Old Testament. Like in Ezekiel, when a righteous man turns away from his righteousness, it's not going to save him. And this is in keeping. This is just evidence that you would glean if you just took and looked at the book of Hebrews, atomistically, which we should be doing as exegetes. That way. We're not importing into the text something extraneous from outside of it. That's called eisegesis. We're into exegesis, just bringing out of the text what's in it. So we want to just so you first need to just look at what's going on in the book of Hebrews, and when you do that, you're never going to. The author of the book of Hebrews would never ever subscribe to once saved, always saved. He would never be making these conditional statements like he's been doing. You just have to be honest with yourself, folks, and this is the truth. Okay, in coming to this particular slide here, we will be looking here at structural and conceptual analyses. And so last time we we looked mainly at the structural analysis here of verses 7 to 11. So today we'll be focusing here on verses 12 to 19. And so before we do that, we're going to go ahead and read the text here, beginning at verse 12 here with blepeta. Beware, brethren, lest there be in any one of you an evil heart of unbelief in apostatizing from the living God. But encourage one another daily while it is called today, in order that no certain one of you might be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partakers of the Messiah, if indeed we hold fast the beginning of the conviction firm until the end. While it is being said today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the provocation. For who are those who, having heard and became incited to bitterness? Was it not indeed with all of those who came out of Egypt through Moses? And with whom was he angry at 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? And to whom did he swear not to enter into his rest, but those who were disobedient? So we see, blepamen, that they were not able to enter in the apostation on account of unbelief. So there you go. There's this particular initial midrashic application of Psalm 93, of Psalm 95, in his particular sermon here. So we'll be let's look at this structurally. There is a lot going on here, and the unit does divide very nicely into separate little units. So what I did is I divided this unit into three, in a macro structural level, into three separate units. So 12 and 13, we have an admonition in 12, which basically, talking about apostasy. Beware lest there be an evil heart of unbelief amongst yourselves. And then 2, there is an exhortation for community preservation through encouragement. And there's a very strong adversative here, Allah, but encourage one another daily. Okay, so we have this admonition and exhortation concerning unbelief and community preservation. That's how we're going to title 12 and 13. And then when you come here to verse 14, down here, we have gar. So this serves as a basis statement for the admonition and the exhortation. And it functions very nicely here, verse 14, all by itself. And then when we come down here to 15, even though structurally 15 is a part of this big long periodic sentence starting from 12, it's functioning to introduce a citation out of Psalm 95, verse 7. So it's really, it belongs structurally with what follows, and it's somewhat loosely attached to this big long periodic sentence. It's more like a hinge. Verse 15 functions as a hinge to take us out of this admonition and exhortation and the basis statement into his next point, and which is going to then he's going to have this citation, and then his midrash is going to be it forms three rhetorical basis questions and answers from Psalm 95 with a summary statement. In verse 19 we see that, and then we have here Blepamen here is going to function as an inclusio here back up to Blepeta here that started verse 12, although this is the imperative and this is the indicative form, but it serves as a formulaic inclusio. That's the way we put here Blepamen here, and then there's this nice summary statement we see then that they were not able to enter in on account of unbelief. So boom, that fills out your I guess the macro structure, and then within then what you want to do after you've read through a unit and you made your large points, then what you want to go back is you want to go back to each point and say, well, can I break this, point one? Can we break it down any further? Is there a way then to atomistically look at verse 12 and point number 1, admonition against apostasy through unbelief, and can we structure that? And so this is when you begin to do something like that, this is the type of a structural analysis that will emerge from much meditation, and it's really, it's meditation, and you're looking at the conceptual units or thoughts that emerge from each unit, and so you just itemize it as you go along, and you try to let this be the natural outbreathing of the text. Let the text breathe this out of itself. Don't try not to import anything. Just read the text and then just start writing what you're observing, and then try to put that whole flow of thought into a structure, and so this is what happens when you do it, and it can get quite detailed. But what you're doing is you're turning over every clause or phrase, or definitely purpose clauses and basis clauses, and there's negative purpose statements, and all kinds of stuff like this become very important. And you'll understand it's as you go along, you begin to this stuff will begin to pop out to you. Okay, we'll continue looking this a little more in depth as we move along. Okay, then coming here, just looking at some diagramming try to take on this this particular big long periodic sentence. We can begin up here with adelphoi, which then this functions as an imperatival vocative here, this adelphoi here, because you plural is the subject, but we have adelphoi here in the nominative. So you have to what grammarians do is they put this here on some stilts that's dotted, and it's functioning as an imperatival vocative. And then we have here just simply this imperative, beware, and it's going to be coupled here. So this is V12 here, and then parakaleta is verse 13 here, and that's why you have verses 12 and 13 sandwiched together, because alla here is functioning here then as a adversative, as a it's a contrast, and so that's what you want to then take up here is looking at the contrast of nature here. One is a warning, and the other one functions here, verse 13, as an encouragement. But then looking here, we have a negative purpose clause here. Beware, least, we have mepota, and then we have this impersonal verb esten here, that there be. So it's not like he, she, it's there. Lest there be an evil heart of unbelief in any one of you. And then we have this this infinitive phrase here, in apostatizing from the living God. And we would take this exegetically here as far as understanding how the infinitive is functioning. It's just filling out the verb to be here, esten. But it's apostatizing. So this is aphistemi, would be the verb form, and basically this is coming from apa and then istemi, okay? But when you have, remember, a rough breathing, you have this here, it becomes you have to put in a phi here. So it's just rule changes of grammar. But aphistemi here is in the infinitive form aposteni here. And this is an aorist infinitive here. Okay, so why are we on the lookout, brethren? Why? Lest there be an evil heart of unbelief of any one of you in apostatizing from the living God. So this is how you would grammatically structure verses 12 and 13. And then you have verse 14 here, gar. It's the basis statement, and it basically stems from both blebeta and paraklete. For we have become partakers of the Messiah. So we have this conditional subordinate clause. If we hold firm, or if we hold fast to the beginning of stasis here, how we're to translate this, it's confidence, assurance, it's a very difficult word here to translate. So a lot of commentators are going with confidence here. But what is this? Let's just look at the word. We looked here at aphistemi, or so this means to apa is from or away from, istemi is to stand. So it's to depart from, to walk away from, to leave, depart. Okay. Or stasis would be that which remains under. Okay, so it's like, let's just say you have a bunch of liquid in a glass that has stuff in it. All that stuff settles at the bottom. Okay, the heavier substances are going to accumulate at the bottom. Okay, well that is called the hypostasis, that which stands under, that which is standing below. Okay, whatever is standing below at the bottom, it's the basis of it, of something. It's the substance of something. Okay, so you're trying to take that idea of that which is standing underneath it all, and that's why different contexts have different meanings. We saw back in chapter 1 where Christ he's the essence of the divine being of God. He's the essence. But here, if we hold fast to the beginning of the essence, firm until the end, well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense here. So the basic stance, okay, our basic stance, or our the essence of our convictions, or something like that. The essence of, it's just very difficult how you're going to translate this. Everybody's got everybody notes here that, gosh, well, how do we translate this smoothly? But it's whatever's remaining at the bottom when it's all done and said. So it's this underlying conviction, okay? And I think that's what, the NIV puts here, if we hold fast the initial conviction firm until the end. That sits right with me. It's whatever this the underlying substance of what we believed when we first became Christians. So it's the underlying reality, okay, or this conviction. So now that we've got lost in this verse, let's go back here to Gar 4. We have become partakers of the Messiah, if indeed we hold fast to the initial conviction firm until the end. All right, so that's basically telling us it's reviewing verse. It's kind of like a reflection on verse 6b that we saw above. It's another conditional clause here talking about the conditionality of salvation. And so this is definitely conditioned. Your salvation is conditioned upon, and you notice here that the author includes himself. This is Gegon Amen. This is for we have become partakers of Christ, or I translate to Christ, Messiah. For we have become partakers of the Messiah, if indeed we hold fast to the initial conviction firm, and then until the end. So this is this is how we are to then understand this conditional sentence, and we have the apostasis, and we have this protasis conditional clause here with on per kata somen. And following here, and then we're going to then have this other infinitive phrase that's functioning as a speech report formula, ento legesthai, while it is being said, do not harden your hearts if you have heard his voice today, as in the provocation. So we needed to put in hos here. This is the other one, as in the provocation. So here this finishes out this whole big long diagramming understanding of how to look at verses 12 to 15 in this big long periodic sentence. It's just basic understanding the basic I guess the ground sentences here, beginning here with blepeta and parakaleta, and then as all the subordinate clauses and infinitive clauses break down, and then they're placed in their constituent parts. So this is one way to view this diagrammatically, and it is fruitful to understand syntax. It helps in exegesis. Okay, we will continue on. Okay, now coming here, now we're going to then be looking here. Let's look here exegetically here and go back and work through our structure. Working through grammar is important, and then we got to put all that and make sense out of it in a structure. So let's just look here. We can tell that verse 12 functions as an admonition against apostasy. So let's just read it. Blepeta. Okay. Beware, brethren, lest there be in any one of you an evil heart of unbelief in apostatizing from the living God. Now that's just remember, this is my own translations, just reading the Greek here. So it starts off here with a call of warning. Okay, so this is going to be blepeta. And then we have the addressees, brethren. Okay, so this vocative, imperatival vocative here, brethren. So he's not talking to the unsaved. Everything in Hebrews, go back to 3:1. Who's he addressing? Holy brethren. Okay, adelphoi, hagioi, right? Partakers. This is the same term, metokoi, partakers of a heavenly calling. All right, and then he calls them brethren here. He's not addressing non-Christians. He's never addressing non-Christians. You hear commentators, there's mixed congregation, it's mixed Jews, there's a lot of different people attached to this. Well, it's news to me. Because every time this author's preaching, he ain't preaching to unbelievers. He's preaching to a certain crowd. Those are believing Christian Jews. So don't let anyone try to water down this passage, trying to bring in extraneous material from outside, that these are not all Christians. I'm telling you, dude, this is why exegesis is so important. Paying attention to words. Don't import into Hebrews your systematic once saved, always saved garbage. It doesn't work here. It's inimical to the text, and this author would repudiate your theology. He never even heard of your theology. He would say it's heresy. Yeah, exactly. And now let's look. We'll continue on. Dude, I'm just telling you as I see it. Okay, I'm not playing games. I know I never play games. It's all, I wear everything on the sleeve. I'm not here to play games. I'm not here to waste my time. I'm here to just follow the text wherever it goes. So now we got this mepota. Okay, so we got this subordinate negative purpose clause. So lest there be in any one of you an evil heart of unbelief. So that's why we are to be warned, beware, look out, observe, brethren. Okay, so what? So okay, he's got our ears. So what is it that we're looking out for? It's a warning that this evil heart of unbelief would not reside in any one amongst you, the holy brethren here in the congregation. And then in departing, so we have here this infinitive clause, in departing, or literally in apostatizing from the living God. And the living God is remember, he's in Rome, so they have all of the false gods who are not alive. They're idols, they're statues. Okay, the living God is here in big relief from the statue religion of the Romans. And we've already looked at here at aphastemi here. It does mean to apostatize, to depart from, and that's what in religiously. So I just transliterated it, apostatize, in apostatizing from the living God, and that's exactly what he wants. And this is why I entitled this "Admonition Against Apostasy Through Unbelief." Okay, that's what's going on here in verse 12. Now, when we come here to the second point here in verse 13, but, okay, so we have this positive contrasting element here, but, okay, this conjunction. So then what? We are then to what? But encourage yourselves daily while it is called today. Boy, it was a catchy little slogan that a pastor had here. It might have been cheer, comfort, I'm not going to. I forgot that, but there was some catchy little thing here. Basically, this pastor was saying, he was putting together the different elements of how parakleta can be understood. So it could be comfort, it could be exhortation, okay, it could be encouragement, okay, and it could be a rebuke. So your sickness determines your medicine, and parakaleo could basically, it means to call alongside. So you're called alongside to whatever the situation demands. So we're there to comfort one another, exhort one another, encourage one another, and if somebody needs to be rebuked, it could be done, and it all could be understood underneath this umbrella term, parakaleo. But encourage one another daily, okay, functioning as an adverb, this prepositional phrase, while it is called today. So this is, we have this improper preposition with a relative pronoun. So this is introducing a subordinate clause, while it is called today. So this is all just just a temporal clause, understanding that while we are encouraging, this encouragement is to be something that is a daily observance, and it's while it's called today. So just don't let the day go down on your encouragement. So this is so what I did here was I put exhortation to mutual communal encouragement, and I think that's a really good way to understand these phrases here, and these clauses here. It's mutual, it's communal, it's a source of encouragement, but it's an exhortation here, because this is an imperative, and it functions here, blepeta, is being bound together here with parakaleta, and so this is beware, and then encourage, and it's connected by this Allah here. Okay, so this is why we connect verses 12 and 13 together. All right, but we can bifurcate the contrasting elements within them. Admonition, exhortation, boom. This all works really good together when you start analyzing. It comes to meditation. So we are to exhort one another daily while it's called today. Now here's your purpose clause, hina. So this is where all the cash is at. Okay, it's in this in this purpose clause here. In order that no certain one of you might be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. So that's very, very important here. It is this purpose clause. And that's why we are to comfort and exhort one another daily. It's so that that no one of us would be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. So this kind of goes back, obviously, to the garden, and it reminds us of how deceiving sin can be. You know, when the devil tempted Eve, you know, she saw that it was, you know, good for food and good to be wise, and it caught her attention, and to make her wise. So she ate and gave it to Adam, and then hence the fall, and the rest is history of living in a fallen nature. But anyhow, so we all know what deceitfulness of sin. Everybody's been enticed. Everybody's partaken of the apple, so to speak, in our own lives, and we know how deceitful sin can be. So this is why the author here is then zeroing in on this, and this all comes from Psalm 95. Remember, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart. So this is where this midrash here begins. He takes up Psalm 95:7 here, and this is what this is his his application of what all this means for the congregation. It's a midrash, and so that no one becomes hardened. And remember here, when you look back, when you look back at the wilderness generation, who did God harden the heart of Pharaoh? And that was what? So that he wouldn't let the children of Israel go. And then the children of Israel in the wilderness, and what's God doing? When we have this, verse 7 here, today if you hear his voice, what did that originally, how is that functioning? Well, it's to understand that on the day of provocation in the wilderness, that was a day that they had to make a decision. In Numbers chapter 14, okay, they had to make a decision about what they were going to do on that day. Okay, were they going to listen to the voice of God's voice, of that they should be motivated by faith, since God brought them out of Egypt through 10 miraculous signs, going through the Red Sea, hearing God's voice at Mount Sinai, and having water come out of a rock for 40 years, or or at this point it's for basically 2 years, and then being led by a pillar of cloud by day and pillar of cloud by night. So there's all these and the feeding of quail, eating quail. I mean, in manna. I mean, their whole life is they're being being taken care of by God. So they should have had the fortitude to go along with Joshua and Caleb's report that they were going to act in faith and move forward. So there is a day There is a day for us where we have to be decisive in listening to God's voice in the moment, so that we're going to cooperate with God through faith. We're going to take hold of this substance, this conviction that we have that we're followers of God, and we're not going to partake of the apple. We're not going to take the easy road out. We're not going to look for an anti-erkagon to take us back to Egypt. Okay, go back there and read, that was 14:4 in the Septuagint, where they wanted to elect an erkagos, okay? And it's really an anti-erkagos. So that they wanted to have their own little anti-Moses take them back, their own captain of their salvation, to return them all to Egypt. So that was something we saw last time. So this is why he's saying that a certain one of you not be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. So this is the midrash back here on Psalm 95:7. Don't harden your heart. And so it's the means by which that sin takes advantage of us is by means of deception here, the instrumentality of hardening. Okay, now we're going to move on here to verse 14. We have Gar here. We have our basis statement. So this is a basis statement of condition for the admonition and exhortation of 12 and 13. And then we have, so this breaks down into an apostasis and a protasis here. And the apostasis comes first in our author. For we have become partakers of the Messiah. So we share in Christ. We have become partakers or sharers in inheritance with him. Okay? And it's talking about something that we have become. So this is an aorist here, and it's already a reality. He's not talking to non-Christians. Okay, he's talking to people who have already become something. They've become partakers, like they're partakers of a heavenly calling. Okay, and it's conditioned here. There's a condition upon which this statement is going to then see how long this reality is enforced for. This reality here, that we are partakers of Christ, will be true as long as, if indeed we hold fast to the initial conviction firm until the end. Okay, so this is how that we're to understand this. This is normal, simple English, and your salvation is based on a condition. Yeah, it's not unconditional. Your salvation is always conditional. It's conditional upon you maintaining faith and faithfulness to your to the initial confidence and firm until the end. We're to be victorious. We're to have an attitude that we're not turning back. We're not a part of those. God's not happy with people who shrink back. Wait till we get to chapter 10. Okay, God doesn't take no pleasure in people who shrink back. If you gotta just look at the last couple verses of chapter 10. You think God has no pleasure in people who shrink back. And so this is basically I'm sorry, folks. The writer of the book of Hebrews never heard of once saved, always saved. Thank God he never took a class on systematic theology from the from the Reformation forward. No, he's not a part of the Reformation. He's a biblical author. We shouldn't be going back necessarily to the Reformation to understand theology. Our theology is here with the text. And don't import your Calvinistic or once saved always saved garbage here. It doesn't fit. All right, this author would say it's heresy. Okay, just read the text and don't import your garbage into it. Okay, so let's look here at what Hughes has to say. Sin, nonetheless, is a constantly present reality which makes its inroads by means of deceitfulness. Personified here, as it seems to be again in 12:4 below. Sin first deceives, then hardens, leaving its victims in an irretrievably hopeless position. And explain with unequivocal frankness. The background of this concept is undoubtedly the account of the fall. Satan, with serpent-like guile, insinuates himself into the consciousness of the woman whom he completely deceives. And she, in turn, tempts the man to disobey the word of God, with the result that the blessing of paradise is exchanged for a curse. And this, the original apostasy, produces a harvest of incalculable bitterness. It's rightly called the deceitfulness of sin. Luther declares because it deceives under the appearance of good. And so these are really good words here taken from Mr. Hughes, who does write a fine commentary, even though we would not be inclined so with terms of once saved, always saved theology. Okay, coming here to another one of these scholars. The strong adversative but, this is the Allah here of verse 13, okay, and sets the positive exhortation over against the warning of 12, suggests that the author believes that an important remedy to the danger of a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God is mutual admonition. In effect, he urges the congregation to do for its members what he himself is doing for them in his discourse. Brothers and sisters, I urge you to bear with my word of exhortation. Moreover, given the wide semantic range of the verb parakaleo, their mutual exhortation will include warning and reproof, as well as encouragement and comfort. Not surprisingly, the paraenetic material in Hebrews itself shows that the author has deliberately juxtaposed warnings and encouragements, and we say together. So that's why we put verses 12 and 13 together, okay? And this is just reading these other scholars helps you. They may have not written a nice structural analysis like I did, but you'll see that their comments are going to then encourage us to move forward in really understanding that how verses 12 and 13 function within the unit. That's what you're always looking for. How does this statement function within the unit? And that's how you're going to arrive at ascertaining its meaning. Remember, meaning is always context driven. Okay, coming here to Deceitfulness concerning hypostasis, but since hypostasis stands here in the same ethical connection as elpis does in 3:6, and is not only used in the LXX for tochelet and tikva, but also occurs in writers deserving special consideration for the New Testament, such as Josephus, Polybius, and Diodorus Siculus, in the signification of perseverantia and fiducia, it is now almost universally conceded that here too it must be taken as equivalent to firm confidence, starting from the fundamental notion of a firm position taken under something else. It acquires that ethical meaning of steady persistence, hope or courage under discouragements or difficulties. Remember, whatever hypostasis means, it means literally that which settles at the bottom of a glass. If you have some liquid with some sediment in it, whatever that sediment is, when it settles in the bottom, it's referred to as that which is standing under, literally, and that's what hypostasis means, okay, standing under, okay. So whatever settles at the bottom, that's the substance, that's the essence of, and that's what this word means. So that's, however you understand that, that's what verse 14 is referring to. It's this fundamental initial conviction, this underlying conviction. It's at the bottom of why we're a Christian. Okay, and so this is what he had to say. Okay, moving along here, we're going to come here back to O'Brien. What the author and his listeners are urged to maintain is literally the beginning, that is arche, of the hypostasis. The word arche, which could mean first principle, here stands in contrast to the end, and so should be taken as the beginning. Remember, hold firm unto the end, and so we have the word telos here being used, okay, and then we have arche being used in the same sentence. So beginning, okay. So this is what we have here. So I would basically say, I'm putting initial, but it means the same thing as beginning. So, okay, the term hypostasis has been the subject of considerable discussion because of its range of meanings. Its primary sense is that which underlies, okay, hence ground or basis. Most recent exegetes prefer confidence, assurance, or conviction, and claim that this confidence is not simply subjective, since it rests upon a stable foundation. Both the objective ground and the subjective conviction are in view. Both senses can be covered in English by the word assurance, the NASB. However, our preference is to interpret hypostasis in an objective sense, either as the basic stance the author and listeners took when they received the gospel, or the reality of becoming partakers of the messianic identity. All right, it's this whole reality that we have become partakers of the Messiah. The basic stance is the antithesis of turning or falling away, 3:12. So what he's trying to go back is going back to if we take the noun form apostasis, which means apostasy, and then hupa, stasis. Okay, so you can see here we have apa and hupa as prefixes. Okay, but the base meaning, stasis, is the same. So this is which remains standing under, which remains standing under, and this is standing off or departure from. Okay, it's leaving your stance. Okay, so he's wanting to see that we should. The author is implicitly insinuating by using of these two words here, even though this may be in the form of apostatemy in verse 12, okay, but it takes the form apostatei, right? The infinitive form, apostatei. I messed up on my spelling here, no big deal. But apostatei here is going to be the infinitive form of to apostatize. So he's just saying he's playing off these two forms here, and he most likely is. So the basic stance is the antithesis, okay, of turning or falling away, while the objective sense of the English pronunciation hypostasis seems to make better sense of the instance of the term in 1, 3, and 11, 1. Okay, so this is O'Brien's statements here, and they would be of interest to you, and that's why I included that in this discussion. To David Allen, and we're going to be looking here, this is verse 14, looking at the conditional aspect of our salvation, and he states here that on-pair introduces a conditional clause, and if is a bit weak for this compound particle. A better rendering would be if indeed, and he is right there. The word is stronger than the usual a and on. Ellingworth treated the condition on as an open one, implying the possibility of not fulfilling the condition. And of course Ellingworth is right, okay, because this is a conditional sentence, based on if. So of course it is. So it's implying the possibility of not fulfilling the condition. However, speaking in reference to the conditional statements in Hebrews 3, 6, and 14, Fanning, which is a big supporter of once saved, always saved, out of Dallas, careful attention to the wording shows that these lines do not cite what will be true if they hold on, but what is already true of them. Now he's right about this, because it says we have become, right? But this having becomeness is going to be it's going to remain as long as the condition is met. That's all. Let's follow along with what he said. So we'll go back. Careful attention to the wording shows that these lines do not cite what will be true if they hold on, but what is already true of them, and which is to be evidenced by their endurance through temptation. And is to be evidenced. Well, it's that is the big if here. Okay, we don't know yet. The story isn't done yet, okay? That's why it's conditional, all right? He's talking to people who already possess salvation. They already have it. He's not talking about people that are not Christians. He addressed them as brothers. He addressed them as partakers of heavenly calling. He called them holy brethren. Of course, these people they're already partakers of Christ, okay? But that's all ifed, okay? That's all under a station of if. You will continue to be this if, all right? Oh my gosh. The writer asserted that their continuance in faith will demonstrate that they are members of God's household, not that it will make it so in the future. Well, it will make it so in the future if they continue. And it's already true of them, okay? And everything's conditioned upon. It's basically your faith. It's you're holding firm to your conviction, okay? they want you to think that the word if, they want to try to somehow dilute the word if so that if's not there. Okay, we're not going to do that. Okay, we're not going to put up with somebody meddling with the author of the book of Hebrews. This is just take Hebrews based on Hebrews, and you won't be getting into a bunch of just mistaking what he's doing. This is a severe rebuke. I mean, look at verse, my gosh, look at 4:1. It starts off, let us fear. Okay, let us fear. He's not, believe me, this author is not some once saved, always saved person. Just look at 4:1. Just read it. It's the first verse after 3:19. Okay, let's see what Delitzsch has to say. We'll get back to some more solid ground here. The on-pair implies that the first proposition holds true in all its extent, provided only that the second be added. What Christ possesses belongs also to them, and will continue to be theirs, but now concealed, but to be made manifest hereafter, provided only they remain steadfast in their confidence of faith. And so the close of their Christian course correspond to its commencement. So he's just basically telling you, yeah, if means if, okay? If means if. This conditional character of the Christian inheritance of salvation is further illustrated by the case of the Israelites, the redeemed of Moses' time. They too forfeited their redemption by failing to fulfill its conditions. So look, folks, Delitzsch, good job, good on you he, no doubt, what Delitzsch is primarily an Old Testament theologian, okay? And that's basically what the writer of Hebrews is. He's an Old Testament theologian, okay? And he's never heard of once saved, always saved. He never heard of medieval and Reformation theology. Thank God they never did. They just stuck with the canon. Okay, so let's come to good old Cockrell. Continuing participation in Christ is dependent upon and therefore motivation for the perseverance of our steadfastness. Firm until the end. There is little support for the subjective reading confidence or assurance espoused by most translations above. The Greek term in question is often employed to denote the stable or unchanging reality that underlies appearance, and thus can be used to describe steadfastness, understood as unchanging and therefore dependable resolve and conduct. Perseverance in such steadfast faithfulness until death or the return of Christ is the opposite of falling away and of the sin and disobedience of the wilderness generation. And good for Mr. Cockrell. He understands the if as well. Okay, coming to Lane, the conditional clause introduced by Aper here. Maybe we forgot to put the noon in here. Supposing that resumes the Aper of 3:6 and stresses the provisional character of the relationship. The appeal to hold firmly to the basic position held at the beginning, verse 14, presents the antithesis to the apostatizing, turning away, in verse 12. It draws its emotional force from the disposition of Israel at Kadesh, where the people determined to elect new leadership and return to Egypt, rather than to maintain their position and to act on the promise of God. The reader the readers are reminded that perseverance until the time of the actual realization of the promise and entrance into the eschatological rest prepared for the people of God is required of those who are partners with Christ. So he understood the if to meaning is if. Okay? So here's another exegete, not an eisegete, importing something into the text that's not there. Okay? So he is letting us know that if means if, and it's all conditioned. Okay? Our salvation is conditional upon what we believe. If we hold firm to our conviction. Okay? God has no pleasure in those who shrink away. Go, like I said, go look at the very last couple verses of chapter 10. Okay? It's gonna let you know what the author of the book of Hebrews, where his head is. He would not belong to a Calvinistic church nor a Baptist, once saved, always saved church. Never. Coming here to Simon Kistemacher, in a concluding paragraph, the author asks a number of rhetorical questions relating to the Israelites who perished in the desert because of unbelief. In a series of self-explanatory questions, the writer makes clear that unbelief ends in death. Who were they who heard and rebelled? Were they not all those Moses led out of Egypt? In the first question, the author directs attention to the message of the lengthy quotation from Psalm 95. And by means of the second question, he provides the answer to the first question. These people had seen the miracles of God performed, and they had experienced the goodness of God day by day, ate manna, and they could see the presence of God in a pillar of fire by night and in the cloud by day. By implication, the author conveys the message already stated in Hebrews 2:2. For if the message spoken by angels was binding, and every violation, disobedience received its just punishment, how shall we escape if we ignore such a great salvation? Boom. He comes to the same logical conclusion that that's why these people could not enter into the promised land, into God's rest, is because of unbelief. That is, this. Now we're moving here to verse 15. While it said, "Today, if you hear His voice, do not harden your hearts," as in the provocation, and then we go into 16 to 18 with these three rhetorical questions, and then it ends in verse 19. We see then that they were not able to enter in on account of unbelief. Okay, so looking here at this phrase, they shall never enter into my rest. They shall never enter. The Greek wording is an incomplete statement that preserves the Hebrew idiom literally, if they enter my rest. A complete oath formula includes a curse in the second half, specifying the consequences that would follow when the condition stated in the first part was met. For example, if I have repaid my ally with harm or plundered my foe without cause, then let the enemy lay my soul in the dust. Okay, and so he's basically giving you an apostasis and a protasis. Okay, it is understood that the divine agency would put the penalty for violation into effect. The oath barring Israel from entering the promised land states only the condition, not the consequences for violating it. This form is common in biblical oaths. Leaving the consequence unstated may reflect uneasiness about the power of the words to inflict harm. But stating the condition allowed the threat to remain effective while inducing listeners to imagine the results of the violation. So this is ingenious, how Coaster understood this. The oath formulas with the apostasis missing, but only the protasis being there, which occurs here in our text. So this is very helpful. Some of you may not understand what I'm talking about. You would have to, I guess you'd have to take Greek for a year or two or something like that, in Hebrew, if you're reading the Hebrew Bible. Okay, moving along. And we can see here that you can look at CDF Mole and Muraoka. They have more to say on this. But we could look here. We could look here at this example here. And Ben-Hadad sent to him and said, "Thus may the gods do to me, and more so, if the dust of Samaria shall cling, literally to the foxes, and all of the people which are in between my feet here." So we're just going to say here, foxes. It's his ground. It's a part of his military personnel here. But the dust of Samaria, it's going to be handfuls. Okay. But here's the oath here. May the gods do to me, right, and more so. Then here's the if. Okay, so here's the if clause. So this is the full, the full idiom here of the oath. It has the apostasis, which this is here up here. Vayomer ya'asun li Elohim v'ko Yosefu. So this would refer to the apostasis, and then this down here would be the protasis, the if clause. Okay, so enough of that. It's probably familiar to you. And we are to look here at Peter O'Brien, verse 19. The series of questions concludes with the observation that draws this part of the homily to a climax in the same key terms with which it began. We see an unbelief. Okay, so he's looking here at blepo and apostia. Okay, the argument moves inexorably to its conclusion. The wilderness generation was excluded from God's promised rest because of rampant unbelief and unfaithfulness. In the sequel to their tragic decision to defy God at Kadesh, they took things into their own hands. They tried to repent and presumptuously decided to enter Canaan after all, in spite of the oath, the divine oath. Their attempt proved disastrous, and they were soundly defeated. The oath of God was final. They shall never enter into my rest. So that they were disbarred from the promised land. Now, they weren't disbarred in this sense from anything else but the entrance into the promised land. They proved unsuitable for it because of their unbelief, because they didn't believe that God was able to bring them in, even though he had delivered them from Egypt. I mean, it's psychotic to try to understand these people, the wilderness crowd. Okay, the conclusion introduces the notion of the impossibility of a second repentance following apostasy. Okay, and anticipates the fuller treatment of this theme later in Hebrews. The warning in this section of Hebrews, then, is intended to prevent the listeners from repeating the sins of the wilderness generation, while the promise in the following paragraph encourages them to preserve so that they might enter the rest that God has prepared for them. Okay, so O'Brien leaves us here with some ominous words and so they're to be pondered upon. Anyhow, hopefully this has been a good session for you guys. If you have any questions, you can please email them to me here for fuller answers. So hopefully you guys have a wonderful day, and then we'll come back in chapter 4.